how do you change this kind of thing? And then I'll just like go into chat GPT to help.
Nice. Hey, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Briefly. Today, we're chatting with my friend Kisha Velasquez. Really interesting episode. It's kind of the same, but also very different of a lot of the episodes we do. So Kisha came into content marketing actually through entrepreneurship. So she built her own company, learned how to use content and SEO to attract visitors and customers to her website, later went on to get her MBA, worked at a few startups, and now she is the web content manager at Fordham University's School of Law. So obviously we talk a lot about that, the similarities and differences of an academic setting versus startup setting. I found it to be fascinating. She's doing a lot of really cool work. She has many of the same challenges that content folks at startups do, but a slightly different charter. So obviously we get into all the details there. Kisha's been a staple in the Superpath community for years. We've gotten to meet and hang out a few times. She's awesome, really smart, really experienced, and I was so glad to finally have her on the podcast. As always, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. This episode of Content Briefly is brought to you by Superpath. I'm kind of half joking, but I thought I'd use this opportunity to give everybody a quick update on a few things happening over here. One is that there are some pretty significant changes coming to the community over the next couple of weeks. We'll be making some announcements about that. Pretty exciting stuff. Basically, Eric helped us run kind of informal survey. We collected a ton of really great feedback though, and we're refreshing the offering along with some other stuff. So I'll leave that teaser out there. More to come on that. On the Help a B2B Writer front, we've made some pretty significant changes to reduce spam. That's worked pretty well. We're still chipping away at that. Kind of a never-ending challenge to keep that going. A few other things that are happening are we're going to be consolidating the daily emails into a single digest. So if you subscribe to 10 categories, you might get 10 emails per day. We're going to be consolidating that into a single email, and you will basically pull in the requests from the categories you're subscribed to each morning. In addition to that, in an effort to help with our kind of ongoing spam issue, we're going to be rolling out a reputation management feature. Still working on this. There's more development going into it than I had initially expected, but basically you'll be able to rate responses. Those responses will sort of be averaged out so that each sender will have a profile. You'll be able to see their reputation score over time, and that will be visible in the emails. We want to incentivize people to send great responses, to collect great feedback, and make it really easy for recipients of those emails to kind of filter through ones that are lower quality. So all that's coming. And then lastly, on the marketplace side, we've been running this marketplace for a while now. We have some really happy customers. It's going quite well. The gist of it is if you're a SaaS company or an agency and you need help sourcing and vetting freelance writers, we'll help you do it. We'll also deal with all the back office stuff, the paperwork, the contracts, the payroll, the 1099s, all that stuff. So not only will it reduce a lot of headache, but for some companies, it solves a compliance issue as well. So if you need help getting a freelance team build up and onboarded, we can help you with that. Anyways, lots of cool stuff going on. If you have questions about any of that, shoot me an email, jimmy@superpath.co. I'll get out of the way and enjoy this conversation with Kisha Velasquez. Content Briefly is produced by our friends at Minutia. To learn more about their podcast production service, as well as their other adaptive content marketing services, check out minutia.com in the show notes. Hey everybody, Jimmy from Superpath here today with another episode of Content Briefly. Today we've got Kisha Velasquez, I have lots of questions for you. You have a cool content marketing background. You have an MBA. You work at Fordham School of Law now. So there's lots of kind of career stuff to unpack there. I'm very curious about the work you're doing at Fordham too. But before we get into all of that, Kisha, would you mind just introducing yourself to folks? Tell us a little bit about who you are and some of the professional work that's gotten you to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I've been doing content marketing. Well, I count my years as an entrepreneur as part of my content marketing journey. So I was technically doing it before I even realized that it was called content marketing because I had my own business. It was direct to consumer. It was like a craft-based business where I would make hats and sell them on Etsy. And that turned into me like selling in person in New York City at different live events. And yeah, I was part of like this whole Etsy New York team. And I did a lot of content because I was trying to drive traffic to my website. So I started blogging that way. And then I also, while I was doing my MBA, I learned about using things like Haro. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to write pitches and I would get like little news segments on TV. I also did more guest posting. So I used sites that I thought were like relevant to guest post. And I would also reach out to like influencers because it was a family business. I reached out to all the cute moms that were like trendy or the cute dads to like, you know, help promote a post, that kind of thing. So I did all of that just to run my business for like 6 years. And eventually I was like, this business model is like really hard to scale when you have a product-based business. So I kind of wanted to do something digital. And also when I was working with other entrepreneurs, they would say, you do a really good job with like your website and with your marketing. So I was like, maybe I should just do this full time. So I decided to look into digital marketing accelerators, and I found one through Acadian Plus. And that's when I learned how to kind of be like more of a T-shaped marketer. And my focus was on content. I didn't want to do social media. Like my mentor was like, you should do social media. And I was like, no, it's for young people. And it moves so fast, I will hate it. So I was like, I like to write. So I'll gonna do that. And then I got my first job at a small business that had like 30 people. It was based in Utah and it was in financial services. And I was their only marketer there. But I convinced the CEO, who was the founder, to hire me because I was like, I've worked with entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur myself. I understand the pain points of that and like how hard it is to get your finances in order. So from that, he gave me a job like on the spot, which like never happens during the interview. And also I was like a content writer. So I definitely started from the bottom and like worked my way up. And then he eventually promoted me to like a marketing manager. And we did a lot of like demand gen webinars with thought leaders and like, CFO services, things like that. So from there, I pivoted into HR tech just because I got really interested in issues like DEI and creating, a happy workplace for employees. And I worked for like an Israeli startup that was just opening up an office in New York City and worked in Soho. So that was like definitely really good experience in being a leader and working with like external vendors, external contracted writers, but also internal writers. We had our own in-house social media marketer. So that was great experience being a manager. And then from there, I kind of pivoted to other HR tech startups. And the last one I worked at, I got laid off. So I was looking for work pretty fast. So I found something through Creative Circle. They gave me an assignment with Fordham, which I thought was interesting because they did a lot of good like social justice work. And at a law school, there's a big emphasis on service, which really aligned with my values, especially like working before in HR tech and DEI. So I've been there ever since as their web content manager.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing story. Okay, I did not know that you ran a business prior to all this. And maybe we start there. I just have a couple quick follow-up questions. So you mentioned the term T-shaped marketer.
Yeah.
And we get like on this podcast, we talk to a lot of content folks who, maybe they got to start in journalism. So like writing is really their core skill and they branch out from there. Or, folks come in, they're copywriters or they work in SEO and then they make their way into content. But coming in as an entrepreneur, I mean, if you can run a business, you can do anything, I think. I mean, obviously writing is super important. And what I'm getting at is how do you think of your own T? You know what I mean? Like, and the T-shaped marketer, for folks who aren't familiar, is basically you have like kind of like one sort of like pillar skill, right? And then you kind of build these other skills around it. So like if you're a writer, maybe then you're adding SEO or demand gen, things like that. How do you define that for yourself?
Yeah. So I really define it in content as like my deep focus. And then within even content, I try to niche down a little bit more. So for a long time, I really focused heavily on like webinars and like, thought leadership content for a long time where you do interviews with people who are subject matter experts or do like customer stories. So that was more of like working with the customer success or the sales team to find those like really good clients and like highlighting their success, which was really helpful in like startups when you're trying to still solidify your business and show that it has proof to get people results that they're looking for. So I know from running a business, it's really important to be able to position yourself and to be a little bit more niche to stand out because there's so many talented content marketers and there's different types of content that you could do. So just on a personal level for my own career, I've been trying to like niche down a little bit more. But the other skills that I've been trying to build up are like SEO. I feel like SEO and content go together like peanut butter and jelly. So especially now being a web content manager, I focus only on the channel of the website. Whereas before I was doing a lot of different type of content, like I was doing, ebooks or one pagers, pillar pages, top of funnel blogs, whatever. And now I don't do all those channels. I just focus on the website and making sure the messaging is clear there and that the prospective students or alumni or any other stakeholder that goes to the website could find what they're looking for. But I still lean on those skills that I started out with, like with copywriting or writing content, and in order to understand like what to highlight on the page and make the experience on the page, easy to follow.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. Let's talk about Fordham. So usually we run through all these questions. People are like, who's your customer? What's the business? How do you measure content? Do all of those same questions apply, right? Like, is your primary goal to acquire quote unquote customers, in this case being law students?
Yeah, definitely to acquire customers. But because it's a school, like with education, I think the product is not just the degree, but it's the experience that you have, the network that you build. And then also the quality of education has a lot to do with the faculty and the faculty scholarship, which is like what they call the research that the faculty does, because that attracts a lot of students from the graduate level. They're looking at the faculty pages because they want to know who's going to teach me. Three of the teachers there might have written the book that you're reading. So when you have that kind of prestigious like faculty, it definitely draws students there. And then also law schools can be very competitive in New York City. There's a lot of really good law schools in the area. There's NYU, there's Columbia. So we have to definitely still stand out and figure out what our unique value proposition is. For us, we get a lot of students that apply, but we're really selective, but also we have really good faculty scholarship. I know we're like number 2 in the nation for the part-time evening program, which is really nice for like working professionals. Yeah. So, and also we have like a really good rate of students that get employed 10 months after they graduate. So they're like 93% of them, they have a job lined up. And, part of that is like the partnerships that we have with the big law firms. So a lot of them turn out to be like lawyers in these big law firms, but also some of them do a lot of public interest work, helping people who are low income, helping people who are immigrants or people get housing, things like that.
Okay. So what you just described is like, I'm thinking of this from like the SaaS perspective. It's like you have so much material to work with, so many stories to tell, and then you have to kind of grapple with all that and then turn it into stuff, right? So it's like if you're owning more than just content, right? It sounds like you're doing work on the website too. Like you have to, when students land there, or you're helping them land there, probably potential students land there, and then they get there, and then you are trying to share all of this, the faculty stories, the full-time versus part-time options, scholarship, all these different things. That's kind of a lot to wrangle. What is a day in the life like? Like, what are like a couple things you're working on like a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so on a day-to-day basis, working on new pages for like new programs that are being launched by different program directors. So they could be like the associate dean of experiential learning. So they're working with the clinics and they're starting new clinics if they get funding to focus on different things like the right to housing could be one of them. Another thing is we do a lot of experiential education and also continuing education. So once they're a lawyer, we do a lot of workshops. And they get like CLE credits, that kind of thing, to say that they're still a knowledgeable, relevant lawyer learning new skills. So we do pages for that, pages for different events and symposiums and conventions that we have there. Also pages for development. So development in, higher ed means the money that they get. So calling alumni, asking people to donate money because it is a private university I work at. I work at a Jesuit university. So they're even at public school, because I constantly get calls from UCF being like, well, you want to donate some money? And I'm like, no. But the development team, they constantly do a lot of programs to have the alumni networking and then also different campaigns like Giving Day. So working on things like that, but also a lot of edits and running accessibility reports, because it is a website that is like a .gov or .edu. Accessibility is really important. So meaning like people who are maybe blind, they have to have tags on certain parts of like different forms or the website or images that are properly tagged. Not just good for SEO, but also for accessibility. So they can use screen readers and making sure like color contrast is correct, that kind of thing. So that's really important in higher ed that I didn't really encounter before when I was working in SaaS. That wasn't as big of an issue. It was more of, like you said, just like getting, MQLs or getting leads. But here at the website for Fordham, one thing we have to focus on is accessibility.
That's really interesting. Are there metrics that you track that are closely tied to performance? And I guess in this case, performance meaning, I don't know, number of applications submitted, enrollment numbers, things like that.
Yeah, so I actually don't own those metrics because they have different offices like admissions.
Got it.
And so they own those metrics. So for me, I focus mostly on the website. So things like the accessibility score, trying to keep it at above like 90%. And then also things like the views on the site and the engagement on the site. Those are the ones that I mostly focus on.
Interesting. We actually, kind of a side note, probably, I don't know, 2 years ago, we're trying to make the Superpath website more accessible. And I didn't realize this, but there's, free tools out there where you put in your URL and it will give you a score. And I guess I was sort of amazed that like out of the box Webflow, WordPress sites they score really, really low. Like in order to actually make a website accessible, there's quite a bit of work that goes into it that's custom, right? That doesn't come with whatever CMS you're using. And having not gone down that path before, I was surprised by how much work it was. It's like a real effort to make a website accessible.
Yeah. And so thankfully, I work with not just my internal marketing team, but I also work with the university team because Fordham Law School is a part of Fordham University. So there's a marketing team at the university level and there's a marketing team at the law school or each individual school level. So I do like maybe every 2 weeks standing meeting with some of the developers and some of the the director of digital marketing at the university and the law school IT and myself. And then they usually will help me with reporting. We use a tool called Site Improve, which is probably like a really common one for higher ed. And they'll help me flag things. And they also have like a contracted developer too that will help me track things. Because sometimes when I'm using like a certain content type that they create, like a templated content type, and then if you don't fill in all the proper URLs or tags, then they could see it. So sometimes I'm just like more focused on making sure the content is correct and it's a good user experience. But then they'll come back and tap me like a week later saying, oh, this needs to be tagged, or like make sure this is like responsive in that way, that kind of thing. So They help me in that way because my role is very much so kind of sitting in between marketing and IT.
Okay. Yeah. That's very interesting. That makes sense too. I mean, you can't present good content without creating the right experience, which I won't say is totally overlooked in the SaaS world, but it kind of plays out a little bit differently. You know what I mean? Like at a larger company, there's probably a web team that owns all that stuff. But at smaller companies, it's just, here's our out of the box CMS, just go as fast as you can.
Yes, exactly. I worked at like a lot of different startups where you're the only like marketing person or content person or person in the CMS, and taking care of like all the technical stuff was very like time consuming, or you wouldn't always have time to like focus on that. So it is nice to be in a bigger organization that's like a little bit more of a built out team that can help you focus in that one area.
Yeah, totally. Like, gosh, probably 10 or 11 years ago, my wife and I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I applied for a content job at the University of Arizona, and it was in the Department of, I think, Optical Sciences. It was so fascinating. Like these people build microscopes and telescopes and stuff like that. And they really wanted to improve just communications and messaging and try to like tell people like what they do. And they needed someone to come in and do that. It ended up not working out, but I got to go there and have an interview, and I was just like, these people are so brilliant. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'm smart enough to translate their subject matter expertise into something that like an average person could read. But the question I want to ask you is, I mean, I imagine you're surrounded by subject matter experts, professors, other faculty, like maybe you have access to current students. Like, does that, or how does that kind of influence the content that you're working on and publishing? Like, are you interviewing folks, or are you able to just like absorb a lot of this because you're in the office at least sometimes?
Yeah, so there's a lot of strong personalities. Lawyers, they're very opinionated, they're very knowledgeable. So, but we we normally just partner with them to get ideas of the programs and the things they want to focus on. And sometimes it is like a matter of just kind of explaining the process of getting things produced as far as like pages or campaigns and things like that. So yeah, they're the expert in legalese and knowledge in that area, but we're the experts in marketing. So we're just trying to make them look good. Like I come from a theater background. So I remember the days when I would either like be performing or be behind the stage in the wings and in my tech blacks and like helping the talent look good. A lot of times I think about the lawyers, they're their talent. We're just trying to promote them whenever they get media mentions and communicate all their events and make them look really good and smart and help distill like these complicated ideas into language that's like easy to understand. And so the students know what the benefits are of the program is. And, you know, the world knows like all the cool events and programs that we're creating.
Yeah, super cool. You mentioned creating pages. Is a page like roughly equivalent to what a SaaS content marketer would call a blog or blog post?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we do have the website, the external website, where those are like marketing pages. So it's like a landing page where you explain a really cool program or, you know, because we have the JD program, we have the international LLM program, and we have like the non-lawyer degrees that are online, like compliance and things like that. So we do create pages like that that kind of explain the benefits and then resources, how to find more information and, you know, captures information as well. We also do have the editorial blog. So the blog is on WordPress, and we have the editorial team that does a lot of writing for that. So we have like an in-house writer, and we have a contracted writer that we use regularly, and we have a editorial director. So they come up with a lot of ideas for the content, but a lot of the times they're getting pinged or they're getting messages rather from the people who are the program managers or the directors. So these are like the associate deans of different clinics or centers, or maybe it's a student association, or maybe it's alumni or development. So they're getting updated about like the different things that are happening in order to cover that. But they also have like reoccurring content around the students and different experiences at Fordham. So they have one reoccurring one called Future Fordham Lawyers, where they do interviews with, you know, 1Ls or like the first year law students, or maybe like the 3L, you know, that's kind of like the senior law students who are about to graduate, that kind of thing, the kind of cool things that they're doing or their background, like why did they decide to go to law school. So we do have like a mix of content on the editorial blog.
Cool. It's really cool that you're well resourced and that it sounds like there's a lot going on.
Yes.
It's cool.
Yes. It's actually, it's like bigger marketing team than some of the teams I worked at when I was at these like SaaS companies. Sometimes they'd have like, you know, customer success or like demand gen manager or, you know, marketing ops. But I feel like this is like one of the biggest marketing teams I've ever worked on. So
that's cool. Are you thinking about SEO at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
We definitely are.
Curious about that.
Funny enough, like a lot of our traffic is direct, probably just because it's been around since 1905. It's really old school. So we have a lot of people directly going to the homepage, probably trying to find information about the programs, the different kinds of law degrees that you can have. But we also do optimize for SEO too on these like key pages that we have. So that's like the homepage, the JD program page, anything about curriculum, and then our fact sheet page.
That's cool. Having a .edu domain to work with from an SEO perspective must be fun, right? Like, is it actually easier to get stuff ranking than if you're like a young startup website with no domain authority?
I think so, because you're already getting a lot of like backlinks from other like sites that, you know, list different law schools or the like US News Report, things like that. Yeah. And just because it has like an established brand and like credibility, you're already getting a lot of traffic. So
that's cool.
But we still monitor it, and we can see like the times, because there's so much data from like years. You can see like there's normal times when it spikes, like before graduation or around the time where people apply to law schools, or when people are like, you know, checking stuff about bar exams. You see those like normal spikes and then like lags during the summer, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Is your content stack kind of more or less the same as, you know, tools you've worked with in the past? Like you mentioned WordPress, or are you also using like Ahrefs, Google Analytics, stuff like that?
Yeah, so instead of Ahrefs, we use something called Bright Edge, which I feel like probably like larger organizations they use Bright Edge, but it does the same thing.
Yeah.
You can see like ranking, the keywords, that kind of thing, suggestions. And then for my CMS, I don't use like WordPress or before I use like HubSpot. I use something called Terminal 4, which is again like a tool that's just for higher ed. So there's a lot of tools out there and like vendors that are specifically for higher ed that these universities use. So Terminal 4 is like more modular. It's not as like fun as picking like a Wix site or any other site where you can kind of drag things around. It's very like modular. Like very rarely do I like go into the HTML, but sometimes I will and be like, how do you change this kind of thing? And then I'll just like go into Chat GPT to help me
Nice.
to figure it out. But like, yeah, we do have also like pre-made templates of different content types that are like used a lot. So like certain column types or like sliders for like slideshows, things like that are used over and over again. But yeah, it's I had to get used to it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's Terminal 4 CMS. Yeah.
You've done startups. Now you're in this academic setting. Could you compare and contrast? Like what, I feel like the startups get the bad rap of like, move fast and break things. Or, I mean, I guess there's pros and cons to that. It's not all just bad, but I'm imagining, and maybe I'm assuming too much, that the pace is slower. Although it does sound like you have tons of work on your plate too. So I'm just curious, like how is that? And is the work-life balance, is that different?
Yeah, so this is like a really big website with like 1,600 pages and 60 different stakeholders. So it's like always a lot of projects and everyone's always like, my thing is the most important, which is that. So you just creating the workflows and expectations, kind of like how I did when I was working at startups. We have like a content request form, but it's just, on a different website. It's on something internal that we call like LawNet, but so that's the same, setting expectations and helping, being a good project manager, right? But then also you just have more stakeholders to work with. And I would just say like internally, it's like more diverse as far as generations. So you're working with more generations, like people will stay there and retire until they like die. So there's people in their 70s that don't know how to open a PDF. And then like when you do a Loom video, it like blows their mind.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because they just are not as like well versed in tech. So learning to work with different generations, definitely interesting. There's definitely more politics. I mean, it's just the way it is at a larger organization. And I think higher ed in general is just more of a traditional mindset when it comes to work. So it's not as flat of an organization where you might have like the ability to like try a lot of things or just do things really fast, like you said, which I think is a benefit, especially for certain like new products and new startups and stuff like that. You do have to kind of go through some of the red tape and it's more hierarchical and figure out, okay, who's the point person? And it's very opaque as far as like, who do you talk to? So when I first started in my first 90 days, one thing I did is created my own visual org chart. And I was like, why don't they have one? Like, I feel like this is so obvious because they did that at all the startups I was at. Some of them had like their own, intranets or a place where you could find like who to talk to. So I just created my own and created like a list of all the different types of content that we have and who's in charge of that and who's the point person. So, learning all of that took a little bit of time, but just doing a lot of like interviews with different stakeholders when I first started, I think was super helpful to get things moving, and establishing that trust early on has been like super important.
That's really cool. I'm just imagining you like coming in, you have like a startup background, there's people who don't know how to open a PDF. They're probably like, oh my God, Kisha, no one has ever worked faster than Kisha does.
Actually, yeah. Sometimes my manager is like, slow down, like, because she'll be like sort of a problem throwing out there in a meeting, like a priorities weekly meeting. And I'll be like, oh, why don't we do this? Da, 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 da. She's like, slow down, Kisha. And I'm like, okay. So learning how to work with different people and their pace. Some people are like, yeah, you did that super fast, but I just like naturally want to like pull in other stakeholders or have like a lot of meetings. A lot of people do these terrible email chains and it just like irks me. So I do a lot of live videos or be like, let's have a conversation. Let's just have like a kickoff meeting, and it just makes the process goes a lot faster.
Yeah, yeah. That's so interesting. I've never really thought about this, but in some ways, startups are like an amazing training ground for working efficiently. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I've never
Yeah.
worked
For
at a really large, I guess I worked at QuickBooks for a little while, and but it's a tech company. So they sort of embrace a lot of this like move fast and break things type stuff. But it actually sounds fun to
yeah.
bring like this startup mindset to a organization that's maybe not used to that type of pace and experimentation and maybe automation and things like that.
Yeah. I feel like what is it? Is it, I don't know if it's Drucker who has like the norming, forming, storming thing. So it's like coming in, I was probably like, let's go really fast. And then they're here. So like somewhere along the line, I'd have to kind of like recalibrate and meet in the middle. And they kind of get used to me being like an agitator or making things go faster
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
catalyst, whatever you want to call it. And then at some point, I kind of like learn how to kind of slow down a little bit or like figure out the red tape or the proper procedure to send things up the chain of command, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And so maybe this is an unfair question to ask you since you currently work there, but do you like it? Like, has this been a good transition for you?
Yeah, no, I really do like it. I like it because it's a lot more stable. And like you're talking about the work-life balance. Like I have a 10-year-old son, so it's nice to kind of just be able to like check out at the end of the day and not like be worried or like checking Slack, on the weekends, that kind of thing. It's definitely more work-life balance for me. I definitely feel like working in a startup was the right way to go in my earlier in my career, like when I was first getting started, because especially as a career changer, I got a lot of really great opportunities working at startups where you could build a program from start to finish, like, think of the idea and then execute it and then see the results really fast. And here, I don't always get to see the results really fast just because things get slowed down just from the approval process.
Right.
So that part is like, oh, I wish, sometimes I could go a little bit faster. But for me, I know the pace is better and I don't feel as like stressed out about money or like as far as do we have enough financial runway for our company to like, are we going to be a company in like 2 to 3 years? Like, I don't know. Sometimes I would feel that way working at certain
Oh my
startups.
gosh, that resonates so much. I am just like constantly worrying about that type of thing. It's like sometimes I forget that like not every company is like may not exist 6 months from now. You know what I mean? Like my wife, for
Yeah.
example, works in healthcare and she's not even allowed to have email on her phone. Like it's not HIPAA compliant, so
Whoa.
she can't. I'm like, I just can't even imagine what that would be like to not
Yeah.
worry about it. So, anyways, that's really cool. Are you able to tease anything you're working on right now? Like do you have any like a couple initiatives that you're kind of thinking through and starting to put into action that you're able to share?
Yeah, definitely. So we're working on like a graduate degree finder. Like we have one for the undergraduate programs. It's a like way that you could kind of drill down and like search for with different keywords to figure out the different programs that you can have. Just because when you're, like a young person trying to figure out what's the right program for me, and the school offers so many different types, it could be like overwhelming. But now they're creating one that's like a graduate level one for all the graduate schools, and it works very similarly. So they could type in keywords or interests, and they can see the different course options and like how they're offered, if it's like online or in person, different specializations, things like that. And then just also like we've been updating the fact sheet, which is like a page that has like snapshot of all the like, you know, things that differentiate our school from the other schools. So highlighting your different rankings and like what makes us unique, things like that.
Super cool. I will, if it's cool, I'll grab a link from you that we can put in the show notes. So people people can go actually like check out the website. Like I always encourage folks like, okay, you've heard how the content works, the folks behind it, you learned about that. Like now go look at the website, see what it looks like in practice. So we'll share that with folks. And how about you? Where's the best place to direct people to follow along with you and your work?
Yeah, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn
Cool.
is like the best place. It's usually the only social media channel that I use. So just / Kisha Velasquez.
Cool. Everybody used to say Twitter, but now nobody says Twitter and everybody says LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Twitter got so weird.
I never was like good at Twitter, but I hear like Threads is something that's like kicking off. I don't know if you use Threads. I haven't even like looked into it yet. So
no, I feel like I'm too old. I don't know. I feel like LinkedIn feels like a very comfortable place for me. I don't know, but it's good. Like LinkedIn for marketing. It's a great place to talk to people or stuff. Cool. So we will definitely link to your LinkedIn profile too and encourage folks to go follow along with Kisha. Kisha, thanks so much. Seriously, it's just like so cool and refreshing to hear about the work you're doing. Totally different than what we typically talk about on this podcast, but it's all these same principles just applied somewhere else. So thank you for taking the time. Exactly. I hope we can do it again.
Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Take care.